So thank you to the organizers for this honor. I'm thrilled to be here today. I wanted to talk a little bit about my story and how I got to where we are now in the pandemic. So, as an infectious disease doctor and scientist, I've spent the last 2 years of my life studying vaccines and viruses, both here in Washington state and around the world. And most of that work has really been focused on vulnerable groups, including pregnant women and young children. When I started my research career, I spent much of my time flying back and forth between Seattle and rural Nepal, where we studied flu vaccines in pregnant women. It was My research was very much focused on how viruses like flu affected very vulnerable people, how they spread in crowded homes and small villages, and how giving flu vaccines to pregnant women could protect themselves as well as their babies. 2 years ago, with my colleagues at the University of Washington, we started a study to develop a citywide pandemic surveillance platform. It had been 100 years since 1918. The idea was that it was really just a matter of time before the next pandemic and that we weren't ready. And we called this the Seattle Flu Study because we were going to test our ideas out here in Seattle and then make it into something that could be used around the world. And as some of you may know, in our study, we were the first to identify community transmission of coronavirus in the United States. And it was using one of these samples that we collected where we found the link between the first and the second case, and were able to quickly figure out that there was no clear relation between the first patient and the second, and therefore there was community transmission that had been going on in the United States over that 6 week period between the first and the second case. We also enrolled the first US patient with coronavirus, and using the samples collected from that patient, as well as several others, we were able to help with development of the vaccines, as well as some of the therapies for coronavirus that are in use now, including the mRNA vaccines, as well as remdesivir and the monoclonal antibodies. So as I think about how things are for me as a woman and as a scientist, thing that has really struck me the most is how this pandemic has laid bare the inequity in how work is distributed along gender lines. For me, the worst day in the pandemic was not the day that we realized it was spreading, but it was the day that schools closed. And I realized that I would suddenly be responsible for childcare, education, and then also to do my job simultaneously. Every moment of my day is a decision point between making sure that children are getting online for their classes and getting an education versus doing my job. And I know that this is what many, many parents now are dealing with here in the United States. I often can't participate in conference calls because they happen at a time when I'm taking care of a child or driving someone somewhere. I really have no doubt in my mind that this pandemic will end. We have 3 vaccines that work. We'll be back to normal soon once those vaccines are fully rolled out in our society. But I think that there has been an enormous toll on women's ability to be part of the workforce, and this will continue for years and years afterwards. And I hope that when we emerge from this, we make sure that we acknowledge and support all the work that has been done and to put in place the policies that are needed to support women both during and outside of pandemics. And I think these things include reliable, subsidized, high quality childcare, flexible paid sick leave and work policies, and equal pay policies for women. I am glad to be part of this moment in history. I am hopeful that science has played a role in the response to this pandemic and changing its course. And where I really see the call to action is in working as hard as we can to get to gender equity after the pandemic. Thank you for this award.